Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. I've suddenly realised that poor old topiary Nigel is exploding with growth. I haven't cut him this year, and he's got growth coming out of his ears, his nostrils, his back. He's looking distinctly shaggy and needs a haircut. And of course, one of the things about topiary is a topiary figure like this is made up of more than one plant, and they grow differently. So this one, which is that back right leg, is much longer than the other leg, but his head is really magnificently chaotic. So we'll give him a trim, and now is a really good time to cut any evergreen topiary, to cut any evergreen hedge for that matter, because if you cut it now in August, it'll stay trim right through till next May. So I'll start off by doing the easy bits, which is the back, and just take that back down. There you go, old chap. It's a good job I know Nigel so well, because here is his nose. But you wouldn't believe it. Look at those whiskers coming out of that, Nigel. Don. We'll take that off. Cut his nose back. He's beginning to appear out of the fuzz. I knew he was in there all the time. Now, there are some other things that are coming up in today's programme. Jamie Butterworth visits the RHS's newest garden at Bridgewater to discover how it's flourishing as it enters its 5th year after opening.
This is a plantsman's paradise. There are some combinations of planting that just make you want to stop and take it in, and this is one of those spaces.
We meet a couple just outside Cambridge who are restoring their garden and its windmill.
Everyone believes that we bought the windmill because of the windmill. They can't imagine that we actually bought it because of the garden.
And Rekha is in her garden, growing vegetables and harvesting crops for a delicious homegrown meal.
I've got the beans, I've got the squash, but what's really making me happy is the black currants. You can make jam with them, you can make cordials, but the best thing is you can freeze them as well.
Good boy. Good boy. At this time of year, you'll find that all trained fruit, whether they're a espalier, a fan, a cordon, will be growing vigorous new shoots. And that's because when you train fruit, you're forcing it to grow either at an angle or even horizontally, because fruit is most productive on a horizontal growth. Whereas all woody plants desperately want to be vertical. If you think about a tree, it always has a lead shoot heading up to the sky, so you're forcing it against its natural inclination. And it repays that at this time of year in summer with these vigorous new vertical shoots, and you get them on the top, you get them underneath. Now, if I prune that in winter, it'll grow back even more vigorously, perhaps with a number of shoots. If I prune it now in summer, that's it. That will stop the growth. Summer pruning restricts growth, so it's really useful if you're training a shape of any kind. Winter pruning encourages growth. The important thing with any pruning is always cut to something. So never cut in the middle, in between two leaves. Cut just above a leaf. I'm going to go down there and just cut like that. And so we've got one here. I'm going to go down. There is a pair coming off that, so we'll just cut it back. This particular section is actually very simple, not much to take off. I'll do the rest, but the principle is exactly the same. However, I want to show you another example, which is a little bit less easy to see, but much more common. Right, this is a half-standard apple tree that I planted, nearly 30 years ago. The variety is Glory of England, sometimes called Farmer's Glory, and it's a great big cooker. And I actually planted it because it was the biggest apple that I'd heard of. They're whoppers. However, a great big heavy apple bends the branch it's growing on. And as you prune it, of course, you get these new shoots, and if you leave them in 2 or 3 years' time, they get apples. But of course, the apple you get will be as big on a new spur and a relatively soft shoot as on an old one, and it bends them and breaks them. So this winter, I cut it back hard. I really reduced it in size because it was quite substantial. And you can see the result, a mass, a flush of new growth. Now, if I leave this, 2 things will happen. One, we'll get more new growth, and then there'll be spurs, and then they'll bend, and then they'll break. And 2, the center of the tree will fill up with growth, and that will result in poor ventilation, not enough light getting through to the fruit. So what I want to do is prune it so it's like a goblet and opened out, and get rid of all the new shoots, except for perhaps 1 or 2 I might need to replace old ones. So start with this one. I'm taking off all the inward branches first. So everything growing in rather than out is coming off. Now this is what you shouldn't do. There you are, you see I've cut off an apple. I wasn't concentrating. It's sort of in the wrong place, but I would definitely want to leave the apple and prune afterwards. And the apple has grown. You can see this is a slightly older bit of wood, it's darker, and there's a spur. There's a little sort of knobble of wood, and that is what the apple is grown on. And a hint of where a spur is going to form is that the wood swells underneath them. You get a slight swelling, and then the spur forms. If possible, cut back to spurs, and then next year that will produce an apple. But I'm afraid that's a goner. Now, Jamie Butterworth went up to RHS Bridgewater the other day to see how it's developed and how it's faring now that it is entering into its 5th year of being open.
Just a few miles from the heart of Manchester is something pretty special. A bold, ambitious garden bursting with life. It's not just about stunning planting. It's about bringing people together, breathing new life into the land, and creating something that will last for generations. This is RHS Bridgewater. Opened in 2021, this was one of Europe's largest ever gardening projects, and I've come to explore and discover how the gardens have developed. Turning 154 acres of overgrown ground into a world-class garden was always going to be a massive challenge. But out of everything that's been created here, the Western Walled Garden has really struck a chord with visitors, and it's easy to see why. This is a plantsman's paradise, and being the paradise garden, it's absolutely apt. There are some combinations of planting that just make you want to stop and take it in, and this is one of those spaces. This is some of the finest gravel dry planting I think I've ever seen. It's uncompromising. It's all about the plants, using big swathes of plants like these asphodelites, dianthus, carthusianorum, bright colours. I absolutely adore it. I'm meeting curator Marcus. He was and still is the driving force behind the planting here at Bridgewater. I'm slightly overwhelmed at how incredible it is, especially knowing what it looked like before. How is it going?
It's going gangbusters, to be honest. You know, we've had a great growing season this year. The 3 before were mixed. Last year was certainly challenging. But in terms of visitation, in terms of the garden coming to life, in terms of the changes that we've made, the impacts that we've seen, it's been fantastic.
How do you keep a space like this then looking so good?
We've got a fabulous team here, and most of them have been instrumental in putting this garden together. You know, there's a team of 30 full-time gardeners that work at Bridgewater. We've got 10 apprentices. There's over 100 volunteers who assist them. So you've got that level of care, attention to detail, and of course ownership. You know, these guys have been in this space right from the start of the journey. They've planted these things in, you know, 9-centimetre pots. They've seen them from these little babies to the fulsome displays that we've got today.
I genuinely think that you can feel that in a garden when it's the same team of people and people that have put so much care and passion into a space. I think that adds to this being such a special space. The Bascums, the Steepers, it's phenomenal to sort of have them growing that well, but is that the weather this year as much as it is, or?
I think we've done everything we can to ensure success in terms of, you know, the gravel and the soil preparation and things and the plant selection. But of course, the weather's the turbo boost, and you couldn't show off a Mediterranean-esque gravel garden in better conditions than we've got today.
This is it, and this is as good as it gets.
I really love the use of grasses through this. So this Stipa Lessinghiana that's here, I'd never grown this before, didn't really know it at all. But it's just the movement in the wind. You get this elegant, feathery effect. And you can see there's just a little bit of shadow under it as well. I'm really fond of that.
It's sort of the perfect time to have seen what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And the beauty of gardening is it's constantly evolving, but being able to now sort of stand back and edit and tweak and adjust. And
the best bit, it's a delight. It's really nice, that bit. One of the interesting things about the place is we've got the safer options, the things that you'd expect to see growing here. Kitchen garden, for example, in an old Victorian space, is a reasonably conservative option to take. But we have also pushed the boundaries in terms of what we're trying and experimenting with.
it's the nicest gravel garden I've ever seen, I think.
You can keep going. Don't stop.
Bridgewater's the kind of place where history and new ideas grow side by side. And nowhere shows that better than the Chinese streamside garden. Full of energy, texture, and planting that's both thoughtful and brave.
I love this part of the garden. The Chinese stream garden is vast and yet so calm at the same time. The movement of the water, the way it starts from the lake and trickles the way through. There are some areas where it's quite big and it slims down, it's fast, it's slow, and that really relaxes the space. But the best bit is the planting. You've got these majestic oak trees coming down into acers and heptacodium, and then down by the water's edge, we've got a lot of damp-loving plants, things like regersias, hostas, primulas. And the primulas at this time of year are providing such a burst of exciting colour. I absolutely love it.
Garden manager Tracy played a key role in transforming what was a muddy field into an area of tranquil beauty.
Tracy, you must be chuffed with how this has turned out. The scale of it is incredible.
It's great. I love when visitors come and they just stop and they're wowed, or they're taking lots of photographs and you see them on their social pages. And it's looking particularly good this time of year, but all the way through the year, there's always the acers that are different colours and the multicoloured variegated leaves. So it works really nicely throughout the season.
Obviously, a garden's forever evolving, and is it looking how you intended it to look?
Yeah, you know what, I think it is. I originally intended to be bright, vibrant, clashing colours, and that was referencing the expos in China or entrance spaces in classical gardens where it's really vibrant, in-your-face colours. And I got a really good bit of advice of, if you're going to go clashing colours, make sure both colours are bright, and then they work together. And that was the principle I went with, and it seems to be delighting visitors.
And I think, I don't know if it's a preconception that I've got, but when you think of a damp garden, quite a calm garden, moving water, you tend to stray towards sort of softer tones, green. So this sort of does throw the rule book away somewhat, and
It does,
works,
yeah.
especially with the astilbes in there as well. It's stunning. So this looks incredible, but you're not stopping here.
Absolutely, this is like the tip of the iceberg.
Wow.
Because we've got over on this side a huge project that's just starting now, which is our Yanzhou Scholars Garden, which links in with why we've got a music pavilion just behind you. And it's a collection of 3 buildings connected by a corridor. And the central space, along with a courtyard garden, will really make you feel like you've been transported to classical gardens in Yanzhou over in China.
Sounds incredible. There are some gardens that are much more than just a garden. Yes, this has world-leading garden design, the very best horticulture at its beating heart, and some of the finest plant combinations you could possibly hope to see. But this has got much more than that. You can feel the energy and the passion in this space from Marcus and Tracy, their team here, the volunteers and the local community. You really get the sense that this is a garden that's going to get better and better and better over time. And I can't wait to see how it continues to develop.
RHS Bridgewater is the one RHS garden that I have not yet visited, and seeing it through Jamie's eyes confirms that I need to rectify that. I do need to go there soon. Last year I made these 4 raised beds specifically to grow cut flowers in. And of course, being raised, they give really good drainage, and that means that they're very suitable for either planting or sowing things at the end of summer and leaving them over winter to grow and develop roots, and then flowering and getting ahead in spring. Now, in this bed, I have these cornflowers and nigella. The nigella, you can see, is completely gone to seed. Cornflowers have got a few flowers, but they've had their day. There we go. Oh, okay, that's a broken one, but that's fine for the moment. Right. This is the shredding bay. That's not the compost heap. That's the bay we put everything, which then gets shredded, in fact gets mown by an old mower, and then goes onto here. And this is the beginning of the compost heap, which ends far down there in about 6 months' time. Now this is compost, straight from the compost bay, but has passed through a sieve, and I prepared this earlier. The bed is not compacted because it's a raised bed, but you can see it is very, very gritty. And I don't need to dig it, but I'm just slightly breaking up the fact that the roots and the rain have formed a slight crust Okay, what do you think, Ned? I'm going to rake that over. Right. Add my compost. What you'll see is how relatively little compost you need. That's, I don't know, a quarter of an inch, maybe half an inch at most. And that's plenty. That will be just enough to stimulate the soil. And remember, when you add compost to a soil, it's not really so much a feed, it's like a starter dough to put bacteria and fungus and nematodes back into the soil to generate more activity within the soil. It's that relationship between life in the soil and the roots of the plants that enables the plants to grow and be healthy. Right, I'm going to work that into the soil a little bit. Right, that is now ready for sowing and for supporting the resulting cut flower crop for another 12 months. Now, for next year's cut flowers, I've got some scabious, which I love. I've got Ami. Now, there are two types of Ami. There's Ami majus, which has a flat umbel, and Ami visnaga, which has a rounded umbel. Ami majus is glorious, but can be a bit tricky to grow and is best sown sort of August, September, late summer. So it germinates, produces a small plant, and then grows through next year. Ami visnaga you can sow in spring. So if you don't sow Ami majus at the back end of summer, then choose Ami visnaga for next spring. And on top of that, I've got some wild carrots. So I've got these umbellifers, which will look marvellous, I hope. So I'm using a board for the spacing. Draw a line with my fingers, like that. And because we're sowing direct, rather than sowing into a seed tray and then pricking out, I want to try and sow as thinly as I can, but these are quite small seeds, so I need to sow carefully. Cover them over. Now this is a scabious, Fata Morgana, which I haven't grown before, but has a kind of very pale yellow, creamy colour, which I think will be brilliant as a cut flower. Okay, so it's scabious. Room for one more, and I'll put that there like that. Cover these over. Ami visnaga flowers a little later than Ami majus and lasts appreciably longer, will last into July, whereas Ami majus I think of as a spring flower. Now, finally, and this is really important, particularly at this time of year, water them. And don't let them dry out. Now, we're going to visit a garden just outside Cambridge, which, although is a very interesting garden, has a very unusual feature.
Everyone believes that we bought it because of the windmill. They can't imagine that we actually bought it because of the garden.
The windmill is actually at the centre of the garden and is completely surrounded by it. Every time I see the windmill, it gives me a little thrill. It's such a wonderful piece of equipment. It's superb. Welcome to Impington Mill, Cambridge. I'm Steve. I'm a professional inventor, and it's been my job to restore the windmill back to its working condition.
I'm Pippa, and it's been my delight to bring this garden back to life.
There's a long history of this having been a mixture of a garden and an orchard, but it has been derelict since 1930, so that by the time we came in 1999, the garden was horrendously overgrown, and we had to go right back to scratch to bring it to life.
Steve is the one that has a very good eye and looks at the different angles and the feeling of the whole part of the landscape we're in.
Pippa spends hours and hours thinking about the colour schemes. Each colour scheme has to merge with its neighbours. She wants the same colour scheme all the way through the year. I just admire that absolutely tremendously.
So this bed here is the first bed that I cleared to start planting. As you can see, the colour frame is purple and blue, and that fits well with the backgrounds of whites that dominate this garden. I'm not an expert gardener, I'm a very much instinctive one, and the mistake I made was to take the planting all the way to the back, and it's far too dark, far too shady, and they don't like it there. What I like about it is the way that the lower planting has spread out and filled the whole area with flower. And then you've got the alliums producing the purple effect.
Pippa has spent 25 years developing the garden. I've spent 25 years restoring the mill. I'm not quite there yet. It's another 2 or 3 years before the mill is going to be fully working, but it's close. So the farmer would arrive with a whole load of carts, each with a whole load of sacks on. The sacks weigh 100 kilos, and you use this chain to lift them up to the top of the mill. You simply hook the chain around the neck of the sack, pull this rope here. The chain will move up through the hatches until they get up the top of the mill. We reckon that for a mill this size, he would be able to grind about 150 tons a year.
What I wanted was basically a natural garden. If I have one real gardening skill, it's patience. And that patience will allow things time to come about. And here we have a bank that was built on a pile of concrete, which had been removed from the windmill. I piled about 6 tons of soil on it and started growing herbs, and they've loved it. We've got thyme down there, mint by the ton, chives here. We've got bronze fennel heading upwards. These are the glorious wild opium poppies that are a major feature of East Anglia, and I just adore them. I think they're the most gorgeous colour. And they are used, or were used, by the local population as an analgesic. They would put the poppy into their beer and use it as a painkiller. But here, they just seed themselves all over the garden. And it's such a lovely spot of colour when you're in the sort of between season of the major bulbs and you're starting to come into the summer bedding.
This is my compost heap. It's a mechanical system for turning the compost, because the more frequently you turn compost, the quicker it rots down. I have always been of an inventive turn of mind from very early age, and my first real invention was a perpetual motion machine, which didn't work. I think I took my early inspiration from The Wind in the Willows and ingenious Mr. Toad. So we've got a line of 6 bins here. The compost starts at the far end up there, and it ends 6 weeks later with turning out this bin here, which is almost ready compost. We'll drag it round the corner and put it into a fixed bin, and that will rot down to beautiful fine mulch. That turns into that one. now got an empty bin, and that's got another week to go. These layers just keep it nice and hot. Mix it up. There you are. And finally, yesterday's bin, which is roaring hot. That is hot to touch. Very recently, I've been diagnosed with a terminal cancer, and I don't know how long I might live. It could be 2 months, 2 years, possibly. I didn't feel down as a result of it. I just saw it as another challenge. I'm going to have to sort something out for this. And actually, I've had a big creative burst, I think, as a result of that positive attitude. And I'm getting there. I'm finding ways in which Pippa and our son, between them, will be able to manage this whole process once I've gone. I would very much like to be remembered, obviously, for the restoration of the mill, but I actually feel more strongly about the garden. Yeah, these are just tremendous, aren't they? Ever seen hostas so big?
It's my smouldering bed. It will smoulder away in colour, and more so as I put more in. I particularly like the smoke bush.
That's a lovely bush and completely different in form.
And that's smouldering.
I love it as a memorial to Pippa's effort. I mean, she's put far more effort into the garden than I have into the mill.
I think he does me too much good.
No, not possible.
This garden's a lovely place to be. It's been an absolute joy to work on. It loves growing things, and I love growing things, and so we all have a great time. Well, here's to you, sir.
Well, here's the windmill.
Yes.
Here's the windmill garden.
Well, I think that Stephen and Pippa have created this extraordinary legacy of a beautiful garden around a full-sized windmill. Never seen that before. Now, this is the damp garden. It's called that not because it's based around the pond, but because it's always the first area of Longmeadow to flood, and it does do so increasingly regularly. Although it's been very dry, like the rest of the garden, for months now, and the pond has dropped about 2 feet, and I've never seen it so empty. Extraordinary. It's certainly an indicator of how climate is changing. Nevertheless, you can see the hostas are not doing badly. Plants are thriving. And one of the great things about this area of the garden is that it's the catalyst for a lot of wildlife. But increasingly, I realize that you don't need to create so-called wildlife areas. And actually, all the evidence is that if you just grow lots of different plants and have as many different habitats as possible, including some water, including long grass, including short grass, anything you like, as long as there's lots of diversity and you're not too neat and tidy, that will attract wildlife. We're going up to Derbyshire now to join Rekha in her veg garden.
I have always found such joy in growing my own fruit and vegetables. And this year I'll take you through how I sow it, grow it, and most rewarding of all, how I cook with it.
I love coming up into the garden at this time of the year. There is so much going on. I've got the beans, I've got the squash, I've got kale. But what's really making me happy is this plant, the black currants. It is full of fruit this year. Black currants are such a good fruit. You can make jam with them, you can make cordials, you can put them in desserts, but the best thing is you can freeze them as well.
When it comes to blackcurrant, you can pick them off one by one, but I find it much easier to prune whole stems once the fruit is ripe. It saves time and is good for the plant too, encouraging new stem growth, giving next year's harvest a head start. After a bit of pruning, it's time for a bit of sowing. I've chosen a variety of bulb fennel called Sweet Florence.
Fennel is a really good crop to grow. It has that aniseed flavour, if you like that. You can use it in salads, you can cook with it, and it looks good too. I'm just dibbing holes about 2 centimetres deep, and that will just help them anchor in. I am going to sow 3 seeds per hole. It's called station sowing. The best of the 3 seedlings that'll come up, I'll keep. The other 2 come out. Now, once I've sown the seeds, I will give it a good watering so that for the next few weeks, I will make sure that this pot doesn't dry out and let them grow in a nice sunny spot with a bit of shade towards the end of the day.
Fennel plants don't like big swings in temperature. That's what makes them bolt. You want them to grow slowly and steadily to build up a nice fat bulb. Which is why midsummer is the perfect time to sow. The nights are warm and the soil's toasty, and I can keep on top of the watering, which fennel really needs to thrive. It's been a hot, dry summer so far. Not the easiest for growing, but some things are really thriving. I'm keeping a close eye on the potatoes, and around now, I like to pinch off the flowers so the plants put all its energy into the spuds, not into the seeds. It'll be a while before the main crop is ready, but the early ones, they're just right for lifting.
I am so happy with this variety. This is Sharpa Una, and I've never grown it before. Just harvest what you see to begin with, but then fork in again, because you never know, there just might be 1 or 2 hidden in there, and you don't want to lose those. Be gentle.
The soil that the early potatoes have left behind is light, open, and full of goodness. Just the spot for planting out my leeks. With space at a premium at this time of the year, it's all about keeping the garden ticking along.
All I did was clear this soil, make sure there was no potatoes left, dug it over a little bit, raked it over, then tampered it down a little bit, and then watered it in just so that it's nice and soft. So that when I do make the dibbing holes, the holes remain rather than the soil going down. So what I've done is I've made sure my holes are 15 centimetre depth, at the same time 15 centimetres in length. This variety of leeks is called Musselburgh. It does very well whatever part of the country you're in. So what I tend to do is just tease them apart and always go for the thickest stem. Tease them through, pop them in some water, wash the compost off, see how long the roots are, cut them off. Now, the only reason why I'm cutting these roots off to just a few centimetres is when I am putting them into the dibbed hole, I don't want the roots to then come upwards. I want them to go downwards, and that way I know the plant will then settle itself in. What I'll do next is now water the holes in, not throw the soil in. By doing that, the soil is gently covering the leek. It'll just slowly, slowly fill up the hole, but it'll also start growing at the same time without getting any grit between the leaves. Now, continue watering in every few weeks, just so that they can establish themselves. And I know that I will have a crop from September right until January. The whole idea of growing your own is the freshness. There is nothing fresher than something being pulled out of the earth there and then and straight into the kitchen.
With the leeks planted out, it's time to turn to what's ready now. I'm harvesting some of my summer cabbage, and this one's coming along beautifully. And so are my onions. These are my main crop variety called Paris Silverskin. And if left to grow to full size, they'll be great for pickling and storing over winter. But I'm going to pick them now as spring onions, perfect for salads, stir-fries and garnishing dishes. Any way you choose, they're delicious and mild compared to cooking onion varieties. I'll leave the rest to grow bigger for later on. 1 sowing, 2 harvests, it keeps the kitchen stocked and the garden working. I'm taking my freshly harvested vegetables and making a sambar, a warm cabbage slaw with a temper of mustard seeds and fresh chili, sprinkled with ground coriander and cumin. A potato salad with spring onion and a bit of sharpness from my homemade pickled beetroot. And for dessert, blackcurrant sponge.
At this time of the year, there is so much going on. If you plan your garden right, there are so many options that you can choose from. This really is plot to plate. So satisfying and so delicious.
I do think that the secret of growing your own is to base it on what you like to eat. But don't think of it as a gardening thing or even necessarily as a cooking thing. Think of it as an eating thing. And certainly Rekha does that brilliantly. Now, I was thinking that the grass borders and the dual garden are very different examples of how to create a border. And it wasn't on purpose, it's just happened. So in the grass borders, although all the plants were carefully chosen, it's left very much to its own devices. And what you have is a massed effect. No one plant is particularly doing spectacular things. It's how they interjoin and work together and how they evolve across the seasons. And it takes hardly any work at all. We cut it all back at the very beginning of spring, we mulch it, maybe do a little bit of weeding, add a few plants now and then, prop them up occasionally, that's it. 10 minutes a week, other than that 1 day of cutting back. And then it works right through the season. And it gives me a lot of pleasure. But in the dual garden, you have a completely different approach. You have really a lot of intense work, intense colour, intense feel, and that involves almost daily manipulation of adding plants, taking away, whether there be annuals or bulbs or bringing in dahlias. We're constantly trying to keep that colour working, whereas it's incidental in the grass borders. Now, I don't think either is better than the other. I get the same pleasure, but of a different kind from both. But it does illustrate 2 very different ways of creating a border. Now, there is a story behind these hydrangeas. I initially bought them this spring as part of the revamping of the dual garden. Now, the dual garden has one rule, which is no white and no pale pink. These, which are called Wind's Red, as you can see, they are distinctly white, but are just starting to blush with the palest of pinks. And I am assured that they will in due course turn red, but not till autumn. And so I'm moving them. I think they're going to do really well here in the orchard beds, and this will be their new home, and they can be as white as they like. And the fact that they turn red in autumn, so much the better. Now, this is Hydrangea paniculata, which means it flowers on new growth. And like all hydrangeas, is quite happy with a bit of shade, but not so happy if it's too dry. And that is a bit of an issue here. And other than the fact that it hasn't rained at all this summer, that's caused mainly by these apple trees sucking up the moisture. But you can see that, there you go, that's pretty dry soil for us. Not dust, and there's plenty of organic matter in there, so it's holding together, but on the dry side. Okay. Okie dokie. There, you see. That's the right level, but don't just pack very, very dry soil around the roots. Water it so it goes down the sides and the bottom of the plant, and then backfill. Right. Now, because it's so dry, that is just soaking up very, very quickly. So now we pull the dry soil around it. Firm it in. Hopefully that will be happy here, growing in its new home. I'll have to keep an eye on the moisture, but I can water that, I can spot water it. And the colour will fit in perfectly. It's next door to a hydrangea quercifolia. And there's Annabelle across the way. So this is becoming hydrangea walk. Right, the other one is going a little bit down there. There we go. Oh, that's very nice. That is about right. So, same again. Before backfilling, I'll water around the roots and underneath them. Okay, I need to get more water to finish this, but we're going now to one of your gardens, except that this is really special because this garden has been sent to us from a viewer in Ukraine.
My name is Alla and I'm gardening in the war zone, Kharkiv, Ukraine. The hostilities take place directly in my region. The front line is very close to Kharkiv and it continues driving even closer to the city, making situation unpredictable. Gardening in a war zone is a big challenge. Since the very beginning, missile, drone and glide bomb attacks were terrible, and they continue for now. We often have blackouts, and during blackouts you do not have heating, water supply and other utilities, so you can't water your garden. We're also limited in the maintenance of the garden because it's very dangerous to go outside during alerts, and you can't move during curfew. You can't come to your garden. So many clematis species and varieties on my garden there, and I adore them so much that it's difficult for me to name absolute favorites. But I would definitely say that I just fell in love with the bell-shaped clematis, and I have so many of them in the garden. This is Clematis somnet, also Clematis texensis, Clematis Buckland Beauty, and Clematis glaucophila. I just adore all of them. I just adore starting plants from seeds. Every seedling actually feels like your own child. At the moment I'm standing next to my own Clematis Viticella seedling, which has already turned into a big and very abundant bush. Photography has a very special place in my life. Photography became my second big hobby after gardening because it helps me to stay positive and to concentrate on producing beauty, creating beauty, but not thinking about the war all the time. During the war, the garden became the only hope for me in every sense. Every time I go out to my garden and start working it, I forget about the war for some time. And every time when I'm too depressed, I say to myself, do not think about the war, think about the flowers.
I think everybody who has a garden can relate to this idea of a garden being a solace and the process of nurturing it, being life-enhancing, even under extreme conditions. But I think very few people kind of experience that solace in those kinds of conditions. And please do keep sending in the films of your gardens. We love seeing them. And if you go to our website, you will get all the information you need about how to share them. Come on, Ned. As soon as you hit August, you're running out of light. That's the key thing with anything that's growing, is the light is starting to fade. And when you're sowing seeds, that's really influential. So you want to start planning your seed sowing for autumn and winter now. Now, I've got 4 seeds here that I like to grow. I've got giant winter spinach. Now, I love spinach and it's a really good crop, but the winter spinach is hardier than normal spinach. Cabbage, spring cabbage, very popular, very available. This is Greyhound, which I really like. Now, these will be ready to harvest not before next February, if you sow them now, and could be as late as May, but now is the time to sow them. This is collards. Now, Americans are very familiar with collards, particularly in the South, collard greens. It's what I would call just spring cabbage, and they're absolutely lovely. And finally, kohlrabi. Kohlrabi is different in so much that it's not a leaf, not difficult to grow, grows rather quicker than the others. Unlike the other 3, it's not really frost hardy. It'll take a touch of frost, but not too much. So I'm going to start by sowing this now. Right. Maybe a little bit more in there, actually. Okay. The beauty of sowing in a seed tray and then growing them on and pricking them out and then planting them out is you can be much more economical with seed and also much easier to protect them against any pests such as slugs and snails. Just sprinkle them thinly on the surface, like this. That'll do. Put that back in there. Lightly press it down just to make contact, and then cover it either with vermiculite or, in this case, I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of compost on top. Just cover them over. Right, label them, of course. Let's turn that over. Okay, right, I will put that in a tray of water to soak and then somewhere warm to germinate. The windowsill will do fine. And then when there are 2 true leaves, I will prick them out into plugs, and then when the roots are formed in the plug, plant them out. That'll be in about the middle of September, maybe the end, be ready to harvest sort of in October, November, and with a bit of protection right through till Christmas. Okay, I'm going to get on and sow the rest, but while I'm doing that, here are your jobs for the weekend. If you have a wildflower meadow, however small, now is the time to cut it. Be sure to gather up all the grass, because if it's left behind, it'll fertilize the ground, and that will mean that the grass will grow at the expense of wildflowers. I like to give it a final cut with a mower to make sure it's really short, and also that will expose bare soil, which is good for the wildflower seeds so that they can germinate. And then you can keep it as short as you like for the rest of the year. But once we reach winter, don't cut it again until this time next year. Spent buddleia flowers, particularly on white buddleia, look terrible. So it's a good idea to remove them. Prune back to a side shoot, and this will carry a bud which will provoke more flowers to bloom throughout the rest of the summer. And the cut flowers can be taken to the compost and added to the heap. It's a great idea to collect seed from your garden. Always use a paper bag, not a plastic one, as this will stop the seeds getting damp. And invert the seed heads into the bag or envelope, and that can be stored for weeks or even months. I'm collecting here Nigella and also foxgloves. But whatever you choose to collect, it not only will save you money, but also mean that you have genetic stock that is perfectly adapted to your garden. I've got a bit of a problem with these crab apples in the Paradise Garden. There's 4 crab apples called Everest. They're lovely, beautiful blossom, really good little apples, both decoratively and if you want to make crab apple jelly, fantastic. However, we have so many apples this year, and it's been such a dry year that there is a real risk of the branches breaking. So I want to do a little bit of remedial pruning to try and save the whole thing. Right, there we go. It's a shame, but it's for the greater good. You'd be amazed at how heavy this is. The weight of the fruit. No wonder branches break. So by a little bit of pruning now, I'm preserving what's left of the tree, and then in winter, when the fruit have fallen and the leaves are down and I can see the shape with the bare branches, then I can continue to prune it to shape. Well, that's it for this week. I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next Friday. So until then, bye-bye.